We cover the whole spectrum of the Truth Commission process in today's special report: brutality, forgiveness, and justice. We focus on two assassinations today: David Webster and Anton Lubowski. And not surprisingly, the same characters appear in both dramas. We also look at what that old charmer, Desmond Tutu, did on Valentine's Day. But we start with Valentine's Day 4 years ago in Pietermaritzburg, where one person died and two were injured in an attack on a disco in the coal mining town of Newcastle. At the amnesty hearing in Pietermaritzburg this week, the mother of the victim heard how the perpetrators carefully planned and then carried out their order to kill as many white people as they could. They only managed to kill one, her daughter.
Valentine's Day in 1994. South Africa is being run by a transitional executive council, and preparations for the first ever democratic elections are well underway. But in the bustling coal mining town of Newcastle, however, preparations of a different kind are being made.
The instructions I get from John's Way is that myself and Andile will be my assistant in that unit as an assistant commander. He also led me to some two gentlemen and also gave us instruction that we should go to Newcastle, and firearms are already in Newcastle, and when we arrive in Newcastle we will attack places where we will see as places which are usually frequented by white people.
APLA operatives Walter Falibango Tanda and Andile Shiteka went to Newcastle as ordered, and after a brief reconnaissance they identified their targets. Tanda, Shiteka and Bongani Malevu appeared before the TRC Amnesty Committee this week.
Who decided on attacking the Crazy Beat Disco?
Crazy Beat Disco decided.
The decision was taken by Tanda.
Yes.
The reason the city selected two targets.
The reason was because two targets were selected: a restaurant and the Crazy Beat Disco. We failed to attack one, we had the option to attack the other one, either the restaurant or the Crazy Beat.
Malevu gave them each an R4 rifle and a hand grenade. Early that evening, Tanda and Shiteka set off. First, they hijacked a car and then enlisted the help of 3 more men before setting off on their mission, the Crazy Beat Disco.
When we arrived at the disco, I went out and looked around at the disco. I went back to the car. I instructed Shiteka to get out. I also instructed Funani to give us a firing cover behind, so that while we are attacking the place, he can.
Yes.
Dube was to sit in the car just to protect the driver.
Tanda and Shiteka then fired into the disco through the burglar bars of an open doorway. The attack lasted less than 5 seconds.
Gunmen attacked a discotheque at Newcastle in Natal last night, killing one person and wounding another. 2 men wearing balaclavas and armed with automatic weapons turned up at the Crazy Beat Disco at about 10 o'clock last night and opened fire through the security door. They killed 31-year-old Mrs. Gerda van Fake of Newcastle and wounded Mr. Chris Malone of Ladysmith. The attackers then fled in a white Toyota Cressida.
We went to the disco about 8 o'clock that night, and it was Valentine's night. It was supposed to be a special night for couples or married people. Cannot specifically say the number, and I won't be able to know that because I didn't count them. I only look at the place and I see that there were people inside and there were many. I don't know how many there were.
Gerard Wolfhard was in the disco that night with his 6-month pregnant wife.
About 10 o'clock that night, I heard a shot go off, and I first thought it was a bomb cracker, and then I heard another 2 shots, and I realized, but look, this is no game now. It's no bomb crackers anymore. This is live ammunition that's flying around here, and then we heard the guns go off automatic, where I dived my wife down on the ground, and a guy with the name of Chris Malone, he was busy dancing with my wife's sister. The way that they shot him in his legs, he fell to the front, which he felt on top of her, and it was only the one woman that got killed that night, which we all very lucky.
Yeah, eyona njongo.
Our aim
Kukuthi zekunyaniseka zekubulala abantu abaninzi.
was to kill as many people as possible.
According to me, more people could have been killed that night, even if it wasn't through the quick reaction of the people, like the white guys. Basically, well, all of them has got military training. So when you pick up a shot, or when you hear shots going off, you know automatically what to do.
2 previous APLA operations, the St. James Church and the Heidelberg Tavern attacks, had raised several questions. Those questions came up yet again this week. When exactly did APLA suspend the armed struggle, and what role did race play in the attacks?
During the conference in December of 1993, that was in Umtata, was it not?
Yeah, well, that's correct.
You say the armed struggle, or the idea of the armed struggle, was to continue. That was the resolution that was taken at that conference.
That's correct.
Was that a clear signal that went out from the leadership, that the armed struggle was to continue during 1994?
In the conference, it wasn't only the leaders were speaking, it was the whole conference that resolved that the struggle should continue.
Was there any disagreement that the struggle should continue to the run-up, in the run-up to the elections in April of 94?
There were 2 views. The other view was that it should be suspended. The other one was that it should continue. However, those who were in favor of the continuation of the armed struggle won the vote.
An attack in those circumstances against white people, predominantly white people, how was that going to assist in overthrowing the regime? Or how was it going to assist in achieving democracy?
PAC's principles are clear. It's also stated in one of the principles that one of their aims is to topple the oppressive government, and if they do attack the white people, the ruling people, the government will take it seriously and they will go about trying to change. I'm saying even if we're about to go through the elections, the organizations at the conference took a resolution that we should continue with the armed struggle, knowing that there will be elections. They were using the strategy that they will go to elections while also attacking at the same time.
Perhaps the most vexing question was why the attack on the disco was carried out at a time when the end of white minority rule was imminent.
Looking at the situation now, can you think of how the attack on the discotheque in any way assisted the move to democracy in South Africa?
umbuzo wakho andiwuva kakuhle ukuthi ungena phi mara
I don't understand how your question fits into all this. However, the aim of all this attack was to fight to get back our land. Therefore, as I'm saying, there's nothing racial, it was just an order that I had to carry out.
The anger and anguish that prevailed in the aftermath of the attack came to a head when Maria Swartz agreed to meet the men who had ended the life of her beloved daughter.
Gentlemen, Mrs. Swartz has agreed to meet with you and speak to you. She appreciates that you made that offer.
Please, under any circumstances, I know that it is difficult for you to forget. It's easy to forget.
It's God's will. Okay, God will take away, not you and me.
My name is Bongani Madek. I'm staying in Newcastle. I do respect your feelings and I do apologize for what happened. It's not that I've done that because I hate white people, but it was because of the circumstances at the point in time. My intention was to pursue the aims and objectives of my organization. Though the situation has changed now, I dearly sympathize with your feelings. And again, I ask for your forgiveness. Though I feel it's very difficult for you to simply say you forgive me at this point in time. But I again ask for your forgiveness.
Okay. Don't do it again.
My name is Walter Tanda. I come from Eastern Cape, and then I'm a member of ABLA, and then I get instruction from the High Command of ABLA. I'm not killing your daughter because it's my decision, but I'm saying sorry. And then everyone in South Africa is no doubt is get the conflict between the oppressed people and oppressed. Now that decision, that thing now, that war I think is over. Thank you.
No killings. That's not necessary. I know she died not for nothing. So please don't kill anymore.
The assassinations of Chris Hani and Griffiths Mkenge have been brought to book. But that is not true of those who assassinated Victoria Mkenge, Dulcie September, David Webster, and Anton Lubowski. But at least in the case of David Webster, someone has been criminally charged with murder. The charges against Ferry Barnard did not exactly come as a surprise.
David Webster was not one of the struggle's public figures. He put his energies into helping individuals jailed and tortured by the apartheid state. He organized support groups for their families and campaigned against detention without trial.
And Almighty God in His great mercy has called him to Himself.
As the government detains people, so too do their families join our organization, join the Detainee Parents Support Committee.
On a public holiday morning in 1989, he was assassinated outside his home in Troyville, shot at close range with a shotgun. 6 months later, the chief suspect in the killing, Ferdy Barnard, was himself detained under the Internal Security Act. He was released for lack of evidence. A year after the killing, the Harms Commission failed to get to the bottom of Webster's killing. At least 2 other commissions also failed. At the inquest into the murder, 2.5 years after the fact, Barnard was again the chief suspect. But the judge, unable to negotiate his way through the morass of lies and intimidated witnesses, effectively let Barnard off.
And you can be the best detective in the world. Without the evidence and without the clues, you can be Sherlock Holmes and you will never solve a case. That's unfortunately what happened here. Like any other murder investigation that's unsolved, this thing will go on until the end. It's going to be never ending until they find the truth or never find the truth. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm glad that it's over for me.
He was right about one thing. The case did come up again. This time it surfaced because of Barnard's own big mouth. The murder of this decent, defenseless man was a shocking act that continued to generate huge interest years after the fact. In the meantime, however, Ferdy Barnard was bragging about it. According to the evidence so far, Barnard used to tell acquaintances that he'd shot David Webster in order to make himself sound like a big man, or he would tell girlfriends about it in order to justify his womanizing. Amor Badenhorst was Barnard's lover for 5 years, and this is what she told the Pretoria High Court this month.
At the time of the inquest, Ferdy was two-timing me with Brenda Milne. I was tired of playing second fiddle. He told me he couldn't make our affair public until after the inquest was over, because Brenda would be angry and she knew too much about Webster. On the day of the inquest verdict, I sat in my car listening to the radio, praying that he would be acquitted.
While she prayed, Barnard, cleared of involvement, was giving a press conference.
Ek dink net dit was miskien 'n baie geskikte politieke speelbal op hierdie stadium. Hierdie saak om dit so uit te byt of dat dit so gebeur soos wat dit tans gebeur het.
He drove from the press conference to her house.
I was in my bedroom and Ferdy came in. He slumped to the floor between the bed and the wall and started talking. He could see I was impatient. I wanted to get to my parents' house. And just before I left the room, he said, "I shot him." I didn't believe him. I thought he was saying it to keep my attention.
Badenhorst said Webster's killing came up again, often.
I began to take it seriously when he told me in about 1995 that Kala Botha was the driver of the car. He said Kala was so shocked that he had to threaten him with a gun to get him to drive away. He told me Webster was an ANC activist, and the day he was shot, Webster had plans to blow up a bus full of people.
In about 1994, the couple were on their way to visit Barnard's parents in Nailstroom. They stopped by the roadside, possibly to light a crack pipe, and climbed an earth dam wall.
He told me he threw the shotgun in the dam, the gun he used to shoot Webster.
It is expected that the court will hear evidence on a weapon eventually fished out of the dam. When Barnard's cocaine habit worsened and he stopped spending money on anything but drugs, Amor Badenhorst turned on him. She ranted, shot at him, burned his sauna to keep warm. Nothing would make him support her and their daughter. So, in 1996, she played her trump card. She sold her story to a Report newspaper, detailing what Barnard had told her about Webster's death. The case was reopened, and this time it was serious. Barnard has been formally charged with murdering David Webster, among 33 other criminal and political charges. Amor Badenhorst was just the first of at least 120 witnesses in a trial expected to last 6 months. Senior State Advocate Anton Ackerman and a crack investigative team have constructed a meticulous case. They have tracked down every lowlife Barnard ever worked with, every fool he ever scammed, anyone who might have heard Barnard boast about Webster's death. They have mixed in any minutiae that could corroborate this testimony. They put Amor Badenhorst into a witness protection program and kept other witnesses secret until they testified. One of these secret witnesses was Johan Kruger, Barnard's go-between in several diamond scams. In 1993, Kruger hooked Barnard up with new potential victims, Dion and Marius Nel of Bloemhof. The brothers held a bribe for their important guest. As the night wore on and the booze flowed, Barnard's sidekick, Corrie Goosen, started boasting about his hero. "This is an important man," he told the brothers. "He works for the CCB." Barnard picked up his cue as the righteous killer. The main work of the CCB had been to take out ANC leaders, he told the men. He described one spectacular hit, the assassination of Dr. David Webster.
He told us with relish how Webster fell on the pavement, lay there and suffocated in his own blood.
Later that night, Barnard admitted, or boasted, that he had been the assassin. If Amor Badenhorst and Johan Kruger are telling the truth, then Barnard knows an awful lot about Webster's death. The reason Webster had to die, who drove the car, where they swapped cars after the shooting, where the murder weapon was disposed of, and even, gruesomely, Webster's final minutes. This is information the TRC needed to hear.
the first thing and most important thing for me is the truth about why David was killed. I want to know why David in particular was killed. What are the reasons that somebody decided that he should be killed? And I want to know who it was who made that decision.
But Barnard treated the idea of amnesty with contempt. He and his military intelligence colleagues all but ignored the TRC. 9 years after Webster died, Barnard's chances of amnesty have come and gone. The Webster case, as he's finding out at the moment, was never closed.
Only 4 months after the assassination of David Webster, the most prominent white member of the Namibian liberation movement, Anton Lubowski, was shot and killed in front of his house in Windhoek. One of the men who conspired to kill him, Irish citizen Donald Aitchison, was arrested soon after the murder. After a few months, he was released without being tried, and he left the country. Aitchison's release was the first mistake in a long and shameful history of the grossest negligence, incompetence and corruption that I have ever seen in any judicial system. The incompetence is continuing. This week, a new inquest was held into Lubowski's assassination. It brought us not a single new fact. The only noteworthy event was that the presiding judge jailed a Namibian newspaper editor for contempt of court. The fact that Lubowski was assassinated by the South African Army's Civil Cooperation Bureau was known a few months after the murder. The names of the conspirators were also published. It is almost 9 years later, and still the Namibian and South African judicial systems can't make any progress. And the suspects are all still smiling, enjoying the fruits of the massive golden handshakes they had received from the military. The South African Truth Commission has also promised an investigation with great fanfare, but it has led to nothing and their investigation was stopped. In fact, the Truth Commission has done little more than listen to the pleas of Anton Lubowski's parents.
I am the father of the late Anton Theodor. Sorry. Anton was shot and killed at approximately 20 hours 30 on the 12th September, and he was about to enter his home at 7 Sanderberg Street, Windhoek, Namibia. There's no doubt that the death of Anton resulted from a politically motivated assassination.
I am requesting the Commission to help us to take away the hindrances so that our child's murderers can be tried in a court of law. The assassination was planned here in South Africa by Afrikaners and was committed in Namibia when it was still under South African jurisdiction.
We still haven't had any justice being done. We've tried every single avenue that is possible, and we've had no luck, and nobody has really taken the time to explain to my parents why nothing has been done. We get excuses like the murder was committed outside the borders of the country, which is very difficult to understand because that was before independence and it was planned here. So, and even if the Commission can just see to it that the world will know about the atrocities committed in the country and how widely people were actually influenced by it. My parents, Anton's children, even my children, I still struggle to get back their faith in the justice system.
The information we have on this case come from a large number of affidavits, some by the suspects themselves, evidence before the Hams Commission and the first Lubowski inquest, interviews with CCB members, and the diary of one of the CCB commanders. July 1989, Namibia was preparing for the election campaign that would lead to independence in March 1990. In South Africa, the head of the CCB, Joe Verster, called in 3 regional structures of his murky organization to launch a campaign to destabilize SWAPO. According to Pieter Botha, one of the CCB's regional managers, This included the assassination of certain SWAPO leaders, sabotage of SWAPO and United Nations vehicles and offices, and disruption of meetings. The head of Region 6 of the CCB, Staal Burger, and his men were eager to launch into this new adventure. They were Ferdy Barnard, Chappie Maria, Kala Botha, and Slang van Zyl. Members we don't have pictures of are Wouter Basson and Johan Niemoller. In May 1989, Donald Aitchison was caught shoplifting in South Africa. The charges were withdrawn when he was recruited as an agent by Ferdy Barnard after Aitchison said he would be prepared to kill for money. Soon afterwards, Chappie Maria became Aitchison's official handler, and the new recruit was dispatched to Windhoek. Lubowski was not only a thorn in the flesh of the ruling South African establishment because he joined SWAPO. He was also a key figure in SWAPO's election campaign. Anton Lubowski became CCB Region 6's first target. Niemoller and Barnard made elaborate videos of Lubowski's home and the area around his house, and tapped his home and office telephones. And on the 1st of September 1989, CCB boss Joe Verster, Staal Burger, Chappie Maria, Kala Botha and Wouter Basson watched the videos in this hotel room in Johannesburg and decided on a plan of action. Around 8 o'clock the evening of 12 September, Aitchison's landlady saw him sneaking out of her property with what looked like a rifle in a bag. He got into his rented red Toyota Conquest with someone else and drove off. Prosecutors and policemen believe the other passenger was his handler, Chappie Maria. A little earlier, Anton Lubowski phoned his partner, Michaela Clayton, from his SWAPO office to tell her he was on his way home. As Lubowski got to his front gate, a red Toyota Conquest stopped a few meters away from him. One of the occupants shot Lubowski several times with an AK-47. Lubowski died immediately.
Okay. This bullet holes from automatic weapon. From automatic weapon as well, bullet holes. And here was his body lying and his head here.
Several neighbors saw the red Conquest racing off. A little later, Aitchison's landlady saw him climb over a wall to his flat in her backyard. Lubowski was buried as a national hero. In the 1994 inquest in the Windhoek High Court, Judge Harold Levy found that there was prima facie evidence that these men were accomplices to the murder. Ferdy Barnard, Chappie Maria, Staal Burger, Kala Botha, Slang van Zyl, Joe Verster, as well as Johan Niemoller and Wouter Basson. The controversial part of Judge Levy's finding was that Aitchison was the man who pulled the trigger. Investigators now believe he was merely the driver of the Red Conquest and that one of the CCB men did the killing. Judge Levy harshly criticized the Prosecutor General of Namibia, Hans Heyman, and some of the police investigators. It must have been at least partly for this reason that Heyman stated that he did not agree with Levy and reopened the inquest. This inquest was held this week. But after 5 days, Judge Nick Hanna found that he had not heard any new evidence to lead him to a different finding, to that of Judge Levy. Again, the CCB men were not there to give evidence. Heyman says he subpoenaed them, and South Africa's Foreign Affairs confirmed that these documents were received from Namibia. but only one working day before they had to appear. What is more, the subpoenas as sent by the Namibians had absolutely no legal standing in South Africa, and the CCB members simply ignored it. It is the second time the Namibians made this mistake. There has been much talk of the extradition of the suspects from South Africa to Namibia.
We had fruitful discussions on the issue of the colonial debt, the issue of assets that were being claimed by the former South African government, including Walvis Bay, the repatriation of Namibian Kufut and Swatuf members from South Africa to Namibia, and the extradition of Lubowski's murder suspects.
There is the question of extradition of certain criminals whose task was to use the cover of state authority in order to plot and to assassinate individuals simply because they demanded freedom and liberation in their own country.
But there is still no extradition treaty between the two countries. However, there is a way out. According to the Extradition Act, the President can declare the suspects liable for extradition. The normal legal processes would then follow as if there were an extradition treaty. But the Namibians, nor anyone else for that matter, have not asked President Mandela to make such a declaration. One should be forgiven for beginning to wonder if there is a political will in Windhoek or Pretoria to resolve this assassination. Perhaps there are still people in power who believe this great lie by former Defence Minister Magnus Malan, recently repeated before the Truth Commission.
Meneer, ek onthou vandag hier dat meneer Lubowski 'n betaalde agent van militêre inligting was. Meneer, ek is verseker dat hy goeie werk vir die Suid-Afrikaanse weermag gedoen het. Die hoof van staf inligting, generaal Witkoek Barnos, sou dus geensins optrede teen Lubowski goedgekeur het nie.
It has been proved beyond doubt by statements coming from former military intelligence officers and analyses of the forged documents produced by the military that Anton Lubowski was never a spy. There seems to be only one way we will ever get to the full truth about Anton Lubowski and have it sanctioned by a court of law, if the 7 South African CCB members named by Judge Levy were charged with the crime of conspiracy to murder. Because all the evidence indicate that the assassination plans were made in Johannesburg. There is at least one full account, that of Slang van Zyl, of the Rosebank meeting where the assassination was sanctioned. And regardless of who pulled the trigger, the large body of evidence gathered so far indicates that all the suspects probably had either actively participated in the plans or knew about it and helped cover it up. This would mean they had a common purpose with the killer. In the interests of justice and the interests of Anton Lubowski's family and 2 young children, we should all hope that this prosecution will indeed happen in the next few months, as has been promised by Justice Department officials. Back to the Truth Commission. The Commission has made significant progress towards finding the truth as far as the past actions of the liberation movements, the right wing, and the old police force are concerned. But the former defense force, especially sinister structures such as special forces, military intelligence, the Department of Covert Collection, and the Civil Cooperation Bureau, have not been forthcoming. We know little more about their role in our past than we did 3 years ago. This week, the 4 previous Defense Force chiefs submitted a new document to the Truth Commission. It consists of 36 pages of accusations, insults, and criticism of the Truth Commission. Instead of explaining their role in the past, the generals beat the Rooi Gevaar drum, accuse the liberation movements of human rights violations, and on top of it, demand an apology from the Truth Commission. We asked the Deputy Chairperson of the Truth Commission, Dr. Alex Boraine, to respond. He either didn't read it properly, or Alex Boraine is a very forgiving Christian.
There are a number of retired generals who have, on numerous occasions, been very critical of the TRC and of myself, and have alleged that we are being unfair to the old South African Defence Force, and that we've painted them in a very bad light, and that they are proud of what they did, and they believe that they were doing what was right for South Africa at that time under those circumstances. And they feel so strongly about it that they now have gone to made a submission to the public protector. Now, our law advisors have only just received that the last day or two from General Fulyun, who visited us here at the TRC. We're studying that. I'm quite sure the public protector will contact us once he and his staff have gone through it, and they will then ask us to reply to the allegations. What the final demand is going to be, I'm not sure. Possibly a demand for an apology or a retraction or whatever.
And now for another short profile in our series of backgrounders on truth commissioners. Dumisa Nsebeza is arguably the most controversial member of the commission. After spending a number of years in detention and defending many political detainees during the 1970s and 80s, his job as head of the TRC's investigative unit puts him at the forefront of uncovering the atrocities of our past.
I was born in Nkala. It's one horse town in the Transkei. It's about 20 kilometers from Elliot, about 101 kilometers from Queenstown. So it's in the northeast Cape, or northeast of Transkei. I was born and bred there. I received my secondary education there until standard 8. Then I went to St. John's College.
From the relatively serene environs of his birthplace in Tala, Dumisa Nsebeza found himself increasingly thrust into the political upheaval that was gathering momentum in the South Africa of the 1970s and 1980s. He was detained in his second year of study at the University of Fort Hare under the then Terrorism Act. He eventually obtained a bachelor's degree and went on to teach.
In 1974, I taught in the College of Sons and Chiefs and Headmen. Some of my students there were General Olomisa, General Matanzima, who is now Provincial Commander of the Eastern Cape Command of the South African National Defence Force. General Brigadier Mkwebi, who is now very much in the SANDF, close to the Minister of Defence. So you can see I've produced for this country some leaders of note, some of them very controversial.
But in 1976, the law caught up with Nsebeza again. He was detained along with Matthew Goniwe and others for furthering the aims of communism. He was released in 1981 and had by then resolved what his role in the struggle would be.
I decided then that my contribution is going to be in the area of defending political offenders. And I made it very clear to liberation movements that I did not want to be compromised. I was going to do legal work because it was risky enough to do legal work. I mean, Mkayenge was killed for no reason but just that he was defending political offenders.
Nsebeza ran a legal practice and defended political detainees until 1995 when he joined the Truth Commission. He was nominated to the commission by his colleague Kaliphile Sizane, then a PAC Member of Parliament.
I was violently against that. I told him, listen, from what I've seen of the bill, there isn't a way I'm going to reconcile myself with this amnesty process. And, you know, we began to discuss this. I was totally against it. But he kept on.
Contrary to his expectations, Nsebeza was shortlisted and called in for an interview.
And in the course of it, I remember Bishop Story was the one who said, I think he's the one who asked why I thought, I ought to be a commissioner. Then I said, well, maybe I ought to be the one because, first of all, I'm a Marxist, which I think blew everybody. because, we had people from the Freedom Front and what have you. So I was doing everything, to make sure that I don't qualify. But I then said, but also I was brought up by Christian parents. And there's something to be said about the fact that the only difference between the teachings of Marx and Christ is the fact that Marx
promised all the good things in life, equality, freedom from slavery, freedom from poverty, disease and all that. He promised all those things in this world. Christ promised them in the next world.
Since being appointed head of the TRC investigative unit, Nsebeza has found that time is a precious commodity. He makes special provision for spending time with his two sons, Samora and Castro.
I wish there was time to relax in the commission. I would, of course, be naive to imply that one works all the time. But for a reason that I cannot blame anyone for, the cell phone never stops ringing. I make an effort to read Jacques Pauw's, books and related books about truth commissions in the world. I do now and again go to the movies, and it's a very escapist sort of environment. I like any form of movies. Skid and Donner, I like those because it's an escape from the harsh realities of the world.
Perhaps the most trying time for Nsebeza was when he was accused of driving the car that took Apla cadres to the grim mission at the Heidelberg Tavern in 1993. Post-TRC life for Nsebeza means going back to the things he loves doing most, his legal practice.
I would like to think that I will practice exclusively in the High Court. Attorneys now have a right of appearance. I would like to believe that I should be able to be a litigator, preferably around constitutional litigation issues in the High Court and in the Constitutional Court.
Back to the amnesty process now. 4 Eastern Cape security policemen this week told the Amnesty Committee that Port Elizabeth activist Sizwe Kondile had to be eliminated because he was a trained ANC terrorist who knew too much about their intelligence network. The men all claim that they were National Party supporters, committed to upholding apartheid, combating the communist onslaught, and fighting terrorism. They say the 1981 murder of Sizwe Kondile was executed as part of their duties as security policemen. One of them admitted that Kondile would have been killed even if he had begged for his life.
This was one of the proudest moments of my life when he graduated his Juris Law. That was 40. I love this photo very much.
Charity Kondile has been trying for nearly 2 decades to find out the truth about the murder of her son, Sizwe. This week she travelled to Cape Town to attend the amnesty hearing of 4 of the policemen who abducted and murdered her firstborn child, and then burned his body to ashes while they drank and had a braai.
There are some times when I forget I'm with the Truth Commission. I feel like standing up and hitting one of them. It's like as if you as a mother you could just stand up and hit one of them. It's so terrible.
I call the applicant, Mr. Hermanus Barend du Plessis, as the first witness in these proceedings.
Captain Hermanus du Plessis, General Nick van Rensburg, General Gerrit Erasmus, and Sergeant Johannes Rath, who have all since retired, are seeking amnesty for their part in Sizwe Kondile's death. Former Vlakplaas Commander DIRK COETZEE also wants amnesty for the same murder, but he has a separate amnesty application and a very different version of when, how and why the murder was carried out. When COETZEE told the Hurrams Commission about the murder of the young ANC guerrilla in 1990, it was bluntly denied by all of these men. Now, for the first time, they're admitting to the nation that they were the ones who decided Sizwe Kondile had to die. Du Plessis, who was in charge of Kondile's interrogation, described him as a trained ANC terrorist whom he'd recruited as an informer. However, he later discovered a note in Kondile's cell which showed that Kondile had tried to double-cross the police.
What was the contents of this note? It was to inform the ANC, it was directed to a person to inform the ANC that firstly he had been arrested And secondly, that he pretended to be an informer, that at this stage he had provided no information which would harm any ANC member.
The security police claimed that Kondile had become a threat to them because he'd already been told the identity of the principal agent in their intelligence network in Lesotho.
After all the facts had been discussed and the matter was investigated, did you decide that Mr. Kondile had to be killed? That is correct.
Van Rensburg says he called his colleague DIRK to ask for assistance in the murder. The security police then faked Kondile's release from the Jeffreys Bay police cells and later abducted him and drove him to the border at Komatipoort.
And Mr. Coetzee then made the suggestion that if we did not want the body to be found, then he suggested that we burnt out the body. They had wood, and a great deal of wood was available, and that we should rather burn the body, and they would ensure that the remains would be thrown in the Komati River. And Mr. Coetzee also mentioned to me that he had a sleeping drug. Mr. Coetzee gave him something to drink, I don't know whether it was a cool drink or a beer, and he drank it. And approximately, I'll just have to guess, but approximately half an hour after that, the man started swaying slowly, his head lurched, and he went to lie on his side.
As far as I can remember, Sergeant Roy Otto took out his firearm, and I think it was his service pistol, and shot Kondile. Afterwards, he was put on some wood which was already there, and we also gathered some more wood, and he was burned to death.
There was a picnic atmosphere around the killing of Mr. Kondile. Drinks were had, and you ate meat while the young man's body was burnt. Is that right?
That's not true. We did braai meat before Mr. Kondile was shot, and we ate before he was shot.
I finally put it to you, Mr. van Rensburg, that your behavior and the behavior of your fellow policemen exceeded the bounds of decency, and that you are not entitled to amnesty for these actions.
I have no comment on that. I think that's for the committee to decide.
I thought that they were very cruel. I think they were very cruel, especially to think that Sizo was young, inexperienced, and a very delicate body. And I feel that at least they could have sent him to jail for all those security laws he was detained for. And I thought to myself, they also had no business to recruit him as an informer.
The order to eliminate Kondile came from this man, General Gerrit Erasmus, the then Divisional Commissioner of the Eastern Cape Security Police, who admitted that he had never met Kondile personally.
There were no rules in this game that we were busy with.
You pass sentence of death on a man, and you and your colleagues then take precautions to make sure that nobody comes to know about it. That is an awesome power. Did you realize that?
That
is so, yes.
They thought that they were God, this was their country.
When he addressed the committee, DIRK Coetzee stuck to his story that Sizwe Kondile had been killed because the Eastern Cape Security Police had not wanted another Steve Biko case on their hands.
Getting rid of him was because he sustained injuries whilst being tortured, dived through a window to get away from his torturers or his interrogators, landed on his head, and a result of that he sustained injuries which could have caused another Biko case was told to me, Mr. Chairman, which had huge political uproar.
Yes, please, thank you, Thank you very much. You've answered the question.
COETZEE also contradicts the policeman on other crucial aspects, such as who was the man who pulled the trigger. Van Rensburg, Du Plessis, Erasmus and Rath all insist that it was a Sergeant Roy Otto of Vlakplaas. DIRK COETZEE denies this, and Sergeant Otto has since committed suicide. The former Vlakplaas boss says the murder was committed in November. The others say July. At the end of the hearing on Friday, COETZEE appealed to the Amnesty Committee to send him for a lie detector test, if it would help them find the truth.
The killing or murder of Sizwe Kondile was callous, as all security police killings, and one wishes that you had never taken part in it.
Of course, we're very sad that he died, but we're very proud that he is amongst those who can be mentioned as having liberated the country, and we think we're enjoying the fruits of his struggle.
The battle between the ANC and the Inkatha Freedom Party has torn communities apart. Richmond in KwaZulu-Natal is one of many regions that bears terrible scars of the continuing conflict. This week, IFP perpetrators and ANC families met face to face at an amnesty hearing in Pietermaritzburg. The outcome was a surprising one, an example perhaps for the rest of that embattled province.
On June 23, 1991, Mduduzi Gumbi and Robert Vozuma were part of a group of heavily armed IFP supporters who attacked the pro-ANC village of Ndaleni. Both men are serving long sentences for murder and attempted murder. Their amnesty application was partly heard last year. This week, Gumbi and Zuma returned to hear one last witness. Judith Dlamini testified that camouflaged policemen drove through the village immediately after the attack, but did nothing to help the injured and dying.
That concludes today's hearing. We will now adjourn.
After the formal proceedings were over, an extraordinary and utterly informal meeting took place in the empty City Hall.
Ya inhloso yami nje ngempela ukuthi ngicele kulaba abalinyazela ukuthi banginike ushwele ukuthi ngempela esimeni esadaleka ngaphandle ukuthi ngenze leqala kwakuvele kuliwa and futhi abanye baba bayazi bekuliwa kulanda wase Richmond maye nami ngangena inhloso ukuthi ngibalimazi kodwa mase sekuvele leli thuba leli lokuthi nixoxiswane kube khona ukubuyisana ngithi angiziveze nami kube bazi ukuthi ngempela abantu babo balinyazelwa kanjani.
Ngizwelana kanye nabo labantwana ngoba kwakungeyona inhloso yabo ukuthi bayobulala ingane zethu. Babenza into eyayenzeka eRichmond kwakuliwa. Manje ke ngisho ukuthi ngiyabaxolela ngoba sebeze bavela obala. Noma beboshiwe ngangazi noma ibona ngingaqinisekanga ukuthi ibona. Kodwa ke mase bevuma bethi ibona ngiyabaxolela.
Ya yebo kunjalo nkosazana kodwa kunjalo ayikho ama-orders engawathola umholi wethu ukuthi ngempela lento eyenzeka yayi-retaliation engangiyenza ngaleso sikhathi ngoba kwakuvele kuliwa engicabanga ukuthi futhi nabo laba bazi bayazi vele kwakulile bawofakazi bami even noma ungabuza ngisho ingane encane kwaqhubeka nabo eRichmond bangafike bakuchazele.
Ubuhlungu kuwena buko isibindi sikuwena mabo vumele bonke ukuxoxa nabo. Hayi akuna ndaba. Awu ingane yami aranje ahamba ngayokhokha ivimba lengudu sokuthiwa kuxolelana.
Phela nje njengoba sazile ukuthi nini nabafuthi
kodwa ngoba manje usezivezile ukuthi hayi uyaxola
ngicela uxolo nami ngiyamxolela ngoba ngiyadinga ukuya lapha ekhaya uma
Oqala kuphela kwalezi ngane
akuphela kwenu enakwenza lokuba sebaningi kubeni kusaqhubeka uma nje mawungehla ushone la ngenzansi asazi noma sisodlule noma sizudla ngempela sizimisele ngokuthula nokuphila.
Yesterday was Valentine's Day. And can there be a bigger Valentine than the priest to the nation, Archbishop Desmond Tutu?
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Thank you very much for doing all the travel. No problem at all. Morning, Father. How are you? Happy Valentine. Thank you for looking after us. God bless you. Thanks very much. Happy Valentine. Hi, Rina.
I want a handshake, a hug, and everything. Tabile, stop!
There doesn't seem to be any Truth Commission hearings set up for this coming week. But that will give us the opportunity to show you background documentaries on cross-border raids, on reconciliation, and on the question, what is evil? If you miss it on Sunday at 6, remember you have another chance on Monday at 1 on SABC 1. Goodbye.